Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, I have to apologize. Stabby wanted us to have this episode, and then she got whisked away for date night, and apparently date night trumps me, so you guys are just SOL. And with that, we're going to let our guests introduce themselves in alphabetical order. We got Miss Charli Cox.
Hey, everybody. I'm Charli Cox. I write science fiction, and I am thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Now, standing next, we got Mr. David Shady. Well, I'm going to pronounce this right one time, David. David Shady Shadoin. Nope, probably.
There you go. No, you got it. That was it right there. Nailed it.
I practiced that one because I didn't want to mess up. Still stumbled.
It's not just a moniker; it's also a descriptor.
Absolutely. Is that your military call sign from when you were in the Air Force?
I'm still in the Air Force, and yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was like a widely known thing, so I wasn't going to out you for still being active.
Oh no, I've been very vocal about that, but since we brought it up, I'm gonna have to say that all of the views that I express on today's episode are not views of the DoD or the Air Force. So please don't come get me, Jag.
So he's saying the shady shenanigans he eludes or represents are his and his alone. Got it.
Exactly.
All right. Next, we got Mr. Jesse James Fain.
Hey everybody, I'm Jesse James Fain. I write science fiction and fantasy, mostly focusing on revenge tales and trying to bring a little bit of piece of real life violence into fiction. So if you like action, I'm your man. And I'm also a Harry Potter kid, have been since I was very young. I was at every midnight release from book 2 onward.
You keep showing up on the podcast like this, I'm going to have to add you to the frequent flyers list.
I'm cool with it.
One in the last week and a half.
JR is going to start getting producer credits while you host.
It'll work.
Whatever works. We would let Nick do that, but nobody trusts him with the electronics. So
that's fair. Understandable.
Anyway, all right. And last but certainly not least, we have the many voices of Teri K. Jobe.
Yes, Teri K. Jobe, baby author of fantasy and some other things, depending on what the anthologies call for, and audiobook narrator extraordinaire.
There you go. All right. And how we first found them. So I found all of these rascals in the Three Ravens Discord. You would think it's a perfect since it's the business Discord, but it's also for the readers too. So if you like nerding out about the series you like, there's a channel for that somewhere in there. So check it out. It's a lot of fun. And that's where we do open calls. So if you're listening and you're not an author and you're not a creative, but you want to get on the podcast and talk nerdy with us, that's the place where we do our open call first because we are affiliated with Three Ravens Publishing. So with that, Charli, this is your inaugural episode. So we do have to ask you the religion questions. Are you ready for this?
I think so. Let's do this.
All right. Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
I'm going to have to go with Stargate SG-1.
Outstanding. Go on. Tell me more.
Loved that show ever since it first aired. The idea of our military going through wormholes and visiting other planets and freeing subjugated Jaffa and the Asgard helping out where they did. I mean, just everything about it was fantastic. And I want to be Samantha Carter when I grow up. So there's that.
I remember watching that movie when it came out in theater with my dad. And I remember when I was in JROTC in high school, and all the recruiters come because they say it's not a recruiting tool, but we totally know it is. And so the Air Force shows up, and they were like, "What's it going to take, Mr. Handley, to make you sign up with us instead of the Army?" And I'm like, "If you can get me in the SG program, I'm in." And they wouldn't do it. They said I didn't have a high enough security clearance. So,
rude.
Rude, right?
So devastating.
There might have been something about your ASVAB score too, but
Oh, details.
I got like a 94. I don't know if that was good or bad at the time. I don't remember. It's been a while.
Oh, you were probably pretty good back then, to be honest. But
I know
you and I have discussed that before. That's the only reason I'm giving you a hard time about it.
Yeah, no, they gave me I just remember that the nukes kept trying to recruit me, and I'm like, dude, I'm colorblind. You're not going to let me pass. Like, I won't pass that physical. Why do you keep wasting your time? But your ASVAB score is good. I'm like, it doesn't matter. I can't see color. But funny
where's
thing
the
is,
red button? I don't know where the red button is.
right? The funny thing is so when I enlisted, the MOS I enlisted into, you couldn't actually be colorblind, but the guy that was the MEPS vision and basically their doctor at the MEP station when I enlisted, and I won't list names because the guy's long since retired, but he served in World War II with my grandfather. So he's like, oh, sure, you made height, weight, and you can see color. Ching. And so when I got my out processing physical, well, after my second tour in Iraq, and they're like, Mr. Handley, do you know you're colorblind? And I'm like, I lost my colors in the war. And I was like telling the doctor, I was like, I want a disability for this. And the regular physician somehow didn't know that was like genetic and not like injury related. And he's like, absolutely, you take that to the VA. And the nurse is just like shaking her head at him. It's the most fun I've ever had messing with that doctor. All right. You got to have fun where you can. I don't know, when you did the officer route, did you guys have to go through MEPS like we did?
Not quite the same, no. We had I had like 3 or 4 different physicals, one right prior to entering the academy, and then another 3 while I was there. And I still get like, obviously we get the annual, but like to be able to do. So when I first got to the academy, they ran us through to make sure that we had like essentially to cover for the fact to make sure that our own physical for entry wasn't a lie. they were backing that up. Yeah. So apparently you caused some sort of effort in correcting all of these physicals, but
okay.
Relying on your physicals and military tradition.
Yeah, the military one though, because I applied for West Point, and so I know what you're talking about for the physical. I just got a better offer somewhere else. But the it's trusting your PE teacher to do your PT test. So I get why they would want to verify.
Oh yeah.
So did you have to do the duck walk though?
No.
Because that I'm just saying
no.
it's
I think I don't know.
We had to stoop down to our boxers and do like the naked or damn near naked duck walk on the cold linoleum while some old doctor with a clipboard sort of stands there at the MEP station. It was embarrassing.
That sounds like elementary school nightmares. Yikes.
It was really just to see follow orders. That was it.
I thought there was. I remember the time they were like, "Oh, it's to make sure you're not hiding asthma." But I don't know. I learned in the Army that sometimes the answers you get and you're convinced are the right answers because someone told you aren't always true when you go back and look them up for yourself. So I've caught myself a few times where I've been told things like that's not true, and then I look it up and I'm like, "Some of them, okay, they lied to me."
To be fair, I mean, most of the things that I'm saying, I'm not a doctor or a nurse for either the Air Force or private practice, so I don't really know. I'm just guessing.
I would totally believe it was just to torment us. I mean, it's just kind of the way of things. But all right, back to you, Charlie. Are you ready for the next one?
I think so. Yes.
All right. Game of Thrones, Wheel of Time, or Chronicles of Narnia.
Considering I'm sitting here on a Harry Potter podcast, I'm going to go with Harry Potter because it may not be, one of the fathers of classic fantasy, but it's a series that I was able to enjoy with my oldest child, and we got to grow up in the universe together, and that's something that I'll never forget. So I'm going to stick with Harry Potter.
That's a perfectly acceptable reason. Nostalgia is the win. All right, and one of the crying shames of adulthood is they don't ask you this question anymore, so we are bringing it back thanks to one of our patrons of the podcast. So, madam, what is your favorite dinosaur?
The Brontosaurus.
Excellent answer.
Love those long neck guys. They're great.
Yeah, I've noticed if they're people of a certain age, they're answering the dinosaur options for the ones that were on the Land Before Time cartoon. Because
that has nothing to do with Littlefoot. Nothing at all.
All right. And because we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, we are no longer knuckle-dragging troglodytes. Coffee or tea? And how do you take it?
Coffee with a lot of sugar and a lot of cream.
Okay, that's acceptable. I keep being told that when I grow up, I will drink black coffee, but so far that has not happened.
My inner child refuses.
Military.
I didn't know that you could drink.
You're not going to.
That's true. I didn't know you could drink coffee in any way other than black.
Yeah, I've tried black coffee and it was bitter like my soul. So I thought, no, we're gonna feed the inner child with the cream and the sugar, and it makes my muse happy. So I'm gonna keep doing it.
I noticed that
I've never tried black coffee. Don't intend to.
I noticed that I have to, like, if I'm trying to get the muse going, I need something like I can have an iced coffee, still doesn't do it for me. If I have to have that hot coffee with me, even if I only have a couple sips, because something about that hot beverage in the mug, like it triggers something in my brain, probably from all those hours in college where that's what kept me awake.
Yeah.
So
Caffeine is my friend.
Mine too. Did they let you have a coffee pot in your barracks when you were at the academy?
Let is a very strong word.
They just didn't ask questions?
Yeah, I mean, so long as they never saw it, they never asked questions. Even though if you showed up, that morning to morning formation or something with a cup of coffee, they were like, huh. All right, well, let's not go look at his room right now.
Absolutely. I know the federal academies are different than the senior military academy, so they're not quite the same in what they allow. Something about being professional and stuff, and I don't know what that's about.
I mean, there was a lot of things that we weren't allowed to have, and I think maybe one or two of those on that list stuck with me.
All right. So now that we got the introduction out of the way, do you feel like you're officially part of the club now, Charlie?
I feel very welcome. Yes. Thank you.
Outstanding. All right. So obviously we're here to talk about the Harry Potter universe. So first, when did everyone discover the books? And you can, in no order, just jump in at any time.
So like I said, I started reading the books to my son when he was little. I think the second movie was in theaters and he was at a neighbor's house and saw the first one. And then we waited for the second one to come out on, they didn't really have streaming at the time. So it was probably Blockbuster. Yes, I'm that old. And so we watched the first two movies and loved them. And I thought, well, let's get the books, because he was of the age that, didn't really want to read. And I thought, well, if we can get him into reading something that he already likes, maybe it'll spark a love in reading for him and he'll read more. And my plan worked, thankfully. So Prisoner of Azkaban came out and we read the book right when the movie came out, and then it became a thing. We would read the book and the movie would come out. We'd go see the movie on opening night, and all the way until the 8th movie came out. And it was great.
Nice. Yeah, I actually was cleaning and downsizing last year, and I actually found my Blockbuster card. I threw it away thinking, like, I don't need this anymore. I should have kept it and, like, put it in a museum.
Oh,
that was an ancient relic, man.
Right?
Relic of power.
Yeah. There actually there's one Blockbuster still open somewhere.
It's in Bend, Oregon, I believe. And I need to make a pilgrimage out there. It's only about a 3-hour drive from me. So I might need to go check that out for reasons.
Yeah, that please be kind to speak. Oh, they do. That is so awesome.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to check
that
out
too. Blockbuster Airbnb. You can go stay in and pull videos off the shelf and stuff.
That is awesome. Sweet. That please be kind and speak your mind was from the signs out every Blockbuster. Please be kind and rewind.
Yep. I remember that.
Although I remember distinctly while we were there once, one guy was yelling at the clerk because apparently it was her fault, that rewinding them and leaving them with the tension like that was actually bad for them. You should leave them wound the other direction when you were done, but the tension was the same there too. So I don't know if that's true or not. But yeah, there were people that would go on and on about the proper way to leave the movie for longevity. So, kids these days,
I have a feeling that people really just like to feed you lines and see what you'll believe.
I mean, I didn't have an opinion. I didn't care. I just thought it was funny that, people don't like, I don't know. I think everyone should be required to work customer service because it just makes you like more aware of the world. You get to meet all the assholes out there, and hopefully it'll make you more empathetic. Or not. It'll give you a story for everything.
Or it'll give you a lifelong hatred of sprinkles.
Go on. I feel like there's a story there. Are you going to write that in a short?
Probably not, because I worked at a dining hall when I was in college, and for about 3 semesters I worked at the dessert station, and we weren't allowed to like roll ice cream cones in the sprinkles because health and safety, I guess. But people wanted it all the time, and I thought already that sprinkles were pointless. They're crunchy, and ice cream isn't supposed to be crunchy. So that just made me loathe them. Sprinkles can die and burn in hell.
Yeah, that's how I worked my way through grad school. I worked at the coffee shop on campus. I'm some of those people were just unreasonable.
Oh yeah,
Like
my
half
goodness.
the stuff they were asking for did nothing for the flavor. It was just throwing words on their latte to make it sound pretentious. Anyway.
That was me at a Togo's in high school. I had this one guy who wanted onions, and so they've got these little cards that tell you how many of each condiment to put on the sandwich. And so I, put the onions on. He's like, no, 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 more onions. So I doubled the onions. No, 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 more onions. I swear this sandwich was piled this high with freaking onions. It's like, dude, you're not even going to taste the rest
Yum.
of your sandwich. What the heck are you doing? But he was a customer. That's what he wanted. So what do you do?
Absolutely. All right. So, Dave, where did you, or excuse me, we'll go with Shady because that's what you have first. Shady, where did you first find the Harry Potter stuff?
So my dad actually got into it first out of our whole family. And I was in school at the time. Like we were doing the whole, what was it? The Pizza Hut read for pizza kind of thing. Read for
I remember those.
Yeah. Of course I lived, like 45 minutes to the nearest Blockbuster, small town, Crete, Nebraska. But they, we would do that at our Pizza Hut. And so I was like looking for the next thing to read. And my dad's like, hey, have you checked this out? And he had gone out and bought the first book and brought it back. He's like, he had enjoyed it. So he's like, yeah, you should read this. And so I did. And that's essentially how I got into it. And then both my parents read the books. My mom read it to my younger siblings. But yeah. And then as the movies came out, like as the books came out, I followed along. As the movies came out, I followed along. I remember when, let's see, there was an original Harry Potter fan site that we would jump onto. You could like get sorted into a house, play like an 8-bit Quidditch game. And I think WB ended up taking it over at some point once the movies came out, and then they revamped it and did it different. But
I could see that the internet in its infancy back then. They really need to reinstate that Pizza Hut reading program for adults, though.
Right?
Because
I keep reading just for that.
Right? All right, what about you, Teri? How did you find the Harry Potter stuff?
In all technicality, I was tricked into it. So my mom was a librarian, and she brought these books home, and she's like, oh, I think you should read these. I think you'd like them. I'm like, I'm 9, 10 at the time. So I'm like, no, they look weird. And so not long afterward, about the time the third one came out, my aunt was visiting, my mom's sister, and she gave me a, belated birthday / Christmas presents because we didn't see her very often. Like, here. And lo and behold, it is the first 3 Harry Potter books. So I was like, well, out of courtesy, I should try to read them. And by the second one, I was hooked and we were off to the races. But then afterwards, that's kind of how I got into audiobook narration early. Like I would read them to my dad when we were having lunch or whatever, and I would imitate what Jim Dale did in his audiobook version. So I started doing, the accents he did and the voices he did, which gave me a lot of practice. So I kind of have them to thank for the narration thing.
So you'll get a kick out of this then, and they only did it for the first book, but they rewrote Harry Potter where everyone spoke in a Scottish brogue, and then they had someone narrate it with the Scottish accent.
I think I've heard of this.
Yeah, I've heard it from Terry Mixon. I haven't actually put hands on it, but I've heard other people say it exists. So, I mean, that would be the kind of thing. That's right up there with Gilbert Godfrey narrating the 50 Shades bit that he did. Like, as far as things I want to hear, right? Like, it's just, you just experience it.
Ooh, nice.
Wow.
I mean, that's hard to top, but I do think, the full-on Scottish version of the Harry Potter would be worth listening to.
Get David Tennant to read it. Oh,
you need a moment. All right, while you take a deep breath,
okay, I'm good.
Down, we're gonna let Jesse say how he found the books.
I was a big reader, even from being a little kid. Ever since I hit Dinotopia at about 6, I couldn't put a book down. And so I was, my grandfather had handed me this big box of books that was like Dune and the David Eddings series and Robin Hobb and some other like the real fantasy classics and some sci-fi classics. And so my mom came home with a copy of the first Harry Potter. the Sorcerer's Stone, and I didn't really like it. It looked too much like a kid's book, and I was like, man, I'm not like, I'm already reading big boy books. Like I don't want to touch this. And Harry was a little bit older than me. I was 97, and I think Harry's supposed to be 10 or so. And I was like, I didn't want to touch it. So it sat for probably 6 months. And then finally my mother just badgered me about it, and I picked it up, and off I went. And like I said, I was at every midnight release from that forward. We had to get a copy for my mom and a copy for me because we both wanted to read it at the same time.
Okay. So what was it? And, like I said, from here on out, we can just sort of, free flowing conversation, but what was it that made it like appeal to you guys?
I think it was, for me at least, the similarity in age. Like I was young enough when I finally got into it that I was hoping my letter would come when I turned 11. Didn't happen, and I'm here now. But it was that, I sympathized with some of the things that Harry was going through at the time, even though they're magical and fantastical, and that's never going to happen. But maybe I'm not 11 yet. And then just kind of becoming a preteen at about the same time he did, because once the first 3 got through, then they were coming out and I had to wait for them. And so I was about the same age as Harry was throughout the books, and so it's like, yeah, I get it. I get what he's going through, and it's just a great story to boot.
The best part about that was the as Jesse and Teri mentioned, that like as kids, you were really into the idea that this could happen to you. And then it helped that, like, for those of us who were just slightly younger than Harry, the movies popped in when we are that age. And so a lot of those movies, now granted, we ended up, when you get to like books 5 or 6 or something, we end up getting ahead of them. But at the same time, you're still like, oh man, this is the adventure I'm living, And that's the best part about like the fantasy series in general, is that like it was a great escape, for us as kids. Like, because like I did the Lord of the Rings thing too, and they were both kind of very similar, same vein, right? The movies came out around the same time, and so it was going out with your friends and pretending to be something, and staying out well into the night, pretending to be wizards or pretending to be like Lord of the Rings characters and running around the neighborhood doing that.
The first book came out in 97 when I was 16, and I was too busy chasing girls and dreams and all that. So I didn't really even know about the books till then. I remember when we were in my pre-deployment for my first deployment in 03, one of the guys had the first paperback in his, because it fit in his cargo pocket on the old BDUs. And he was reading it then, and I thought, I might check that out when I have time. And then that was right about the time Stephen King and J.K. Rowling and John Kerry and all of them were talking bad about the soldiers overseas, right as I'm, on a plane over there. So I'm like, well, forget them. And by the time I got to the point where I can accept that I don't have to like the artist if I like the art, the ship had already sailed, because there's so many books I want to read. It's just I never went back. So I haven't read them. I've watched some of the movies, but I keep falling asleep.
Oh, wow. Yeah, for me, it was, seeing the story through my son's eyes and letting him, he was so invested and wanted to know what happened next. And one of the things that I really love about the book is, the series is, to your point, the first book was a children's book. It was very much written for, your tweens. But as the story progressed, the writing matured, which I thought was brilliant on J.K. Rowling's part. You have a character who's growing and you have a reader who's growing alongside your character. And I think that just made it even that much more of a powerful thing for my son and for other kids his age, to be able to grow up with your favorite fictional character and go through those trials and tribulations with him. I thought it was a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. If I had been in a different place when these came out, like where my kids were the right age, I could see reading that with them, but they just wasn't what they were interested in. But I definitely think there's something powerful about when your kids are interested in reading whatever, like doing that with them.
Yes.
That would change my opinion on just about any book, even if I hated the whatever,
Yeah.
So
I'm throw out something that might be controversial, but I'm going to say that Harry Potter was my first urban fantasy novel.
Not controversial.
And I think that really, like, for me, that's a big part of it, is the real life for the first time blends with like the fantasy and magic. So I was a Lord of the Rings kid, like Shady mentioned. And I was reading the Two Towers. I guess I was on about book 3 of Harry Potter when I was reading Two Towers. And the interesting juxtaposition there of, like, it was taking part of that world and throwing it into part of my world, even if they were English, and have 90% of these problems are solved with modern firearms. But anyway, it was so that's for me, and then Dresden comes right after. I hit high school and get pulled into the world of Harry Dresden, and there's this fun what I guess pipeline is the phrasing I would use. That's like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and then you're in full blown urban fantasy.
The gateway books.
Yeah.
I definitely think the urban fantasy angle has spawned a lot of funny memes, like Lord of the Rings and/or Harry Potter would be a lot quicker if they had pistols instead of wands. Those memes float around and I laugh every time. So I could see what you're talking about, the appeal of that. I did like that they didn't use that shortcut of modern technology, and they just kind of found a reason why it didn't, because that keeps things interesting and just different enough that it doesn't feel like the real world, but it is, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, you got to remember too that the UK at the time, right, is guns are not as readily available there.
Oh no.
So
not at all.
And not only that, but she was also essentially basing it out of the 80s, which there was even a bigger crackdown at that point. Like it's loosened since then, but they're still not very big. So it's like, as much as like the American side of us is like, oh yeah, man, we could solve this with a bunch of pistols real easy. That is not a British thought, really.
No. It makes sense because it's British. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's just kind of remembering where they came from too. That I love a good meme as much as anybody else, but like kind of the facts of the case are that she never would have even probably thought to solve it that way, just because of where they were.
And I do think that that's part of the appeal. The Americans, for whatever reason, after we fought a war twice to keep out the monarchy, 1812 and the revolution, for some reason, modern Americans are obsessed with all things royal and British. So like the appeal of the British style education system with the boarding school, it's just not as common here. I could see that as part of what made it appealing, because that alone felt different. But what is it for the rest of you? What do you think made it so eternal that so many people still love it?
It has classic themes, and I've said on the podcast before that classic themes, like, I don't know if you've ever seen the parallels between Harry Potter and Star Wars, but there's a really good argument for them being very similar stories. There's a special kid whose family he doesn't know had special powers, that has a mysterious figure from the past show up and let him know that he's special. And I'm not going to trace the whole thing. But those classic themes are there, but they're dressed up in this wonderful magical world and this wonderful magical setting. Hogwarts in and of itself captures so many pieces of the imagination. And then you mentioned for American audiences, the boarding school is unusual. That's not our normal way. And so everything about this tale, even if the classic themes are there, is dressed up in this wonderful manner that makes you feel both challenged and scared and powerful. And there's, Harry's trials and tribulations, which none of which are his fault, that were cast upon him as a child. It's not like Harry continues to make bad decisions. He's like 11. He's a 12-year-old fighting for his life. from this terrible dark force that wants to come and end him. And so everything just hits, it just sticks. And it's lightning in a bottle.
And this is what I always point out to people who want to do and get into the creative arts, is when they feel like, oh, they didn't like my story. And I'm like, yeah, do you know how many rejection letters Stephen King and J.K. Rowling both collectively got? And I bet every one of those people that rejected them are like kicking themselves, because I could have made millions. So it's one of those things that you can use as almost as a cautionary tale, because if she had given up at any point in the way, even if you don't know anything about the books, the story she tells where she locked herself in a hotel room to finish these books while she was essentially on welfare, trying to make something better, it's just inspiring on that angle as a single mom.
Yeah, living in her car because they couldn't afford rent anywhere. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, and to your point, Jesse, the world building I thought was just exquisite. I mean, you have, not to mention Hogwarts, but you have all these magical creatures. You've got dragons, you've got hippogriffs, my personal favorite. I love Buckbeak. You know, you've got all these amazing creatures and characters, and they just come together in such a beautiful way. And it's, it's the ultimate triumph of good over evil. And who doesn't love a story with that for a happy ending, when really all you do need is love, because love conquers all. It may take 7 books to do it, but you get there. I mean, it was a beautiful journey.
I do think, given that where Harry starts out, the found family angle also adds a level of timelessness.
Definitely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Shady?
I think it's also...
I was going to say,
I'll take it since he's not saying anything. I think it's also partially the world that Rowling created. You want to go and poke it, because every time you look around, or you go to a new setting, there's something else that's, oh, this is a tavern. Oh, the drinks are just floating around through the space. Oh, okay. What else is weird? And you just want to go beyond the pages of what's actually happening, and you'll go peek in the kitchen. Does the leaky cauldron have house elves? We don't know. We never found that out. So it's like all these things that make it such a rounded world. And to Jesse's point, it is very similar to the Star Wars story. I think I've even seen comparisons to Lord of the Rings in some ways, because Frodo his parents are dead. This, older person shows up, Gandalf, he's special because he has the rings, and so on and so forth. But it's more accessible to younger readers, or even just adults who don't want to try to slog through Lord of the Rings, or who can't handle sci-fi in that same way and enjoy it on the same level. So I think accessibility is a big one.
Yeah, and I think there's a bit of we've hit on world building, and surprise, surprise, I have a world building podcast. But one of the things that I loved about it was kind of what you're mentioning, which is just behind the curtain of all the pages, right? There's this whole wide world that she hints at, and she's thought about a lot of that stuff, right? You built out Diagon Alley, and you go back and you start finding out pieces of it throughout the books. And that's just such a cool way to do it. And then even further, when you get to the movies and stuff, they explore pieces of that themselves that you haven't seen in the books. And so you just get to keep kind of seeing small glimpses into the rest of the world. And then you realize that they have spent time dividing the two worlds, right? You have the Muggle world, which is front facing London. And then you have everything that's behind the scenes, the things you can't see, right? And so it's just that little shift. It's kind of like a portal fantasy in a way, where you jump into the behind the scenes, the portal of wizardry, and then for the whole entirety of the book, you get to live there. And at summer break, got to come back to the real world.
Okay. And with that, we're going to pause for a moment while we shamelessly shill for the man, and then we'll get right back to talking about all things Potterverse.
From R. Max Tilsley, author of Brains, the post-apocalyptic pick-a-path adventure with more than 60 endings, comes the Susie Steele Adventures. Susie has a heart of gold, a set of bad dreams, and a hidden destiny. 6 months ago, Susie's father went to work and never returned, leaving Susie to her hobby of chasing away nannies. That is, until the mysterious and glamorous Cassandra roars into her life, driving a red sports car and promising to be the best of friends. When Susie stumbles on her father's secret lair, a world of magic, ghosts and mysteries beckons. Can she discover the truth, avoid being expelled from school, and keep a ruthless secret society off her back? She's to have a ghost of a chance. She'll need the help of her best friends, one grumpy cat, and a whole lot of daring. The Susie Steele Adventures from R. Max Tilsley. Book 1, The Steel Trap. Book 2, The Steel Bite. Perfect for readers 9+. Available in print and ebook.
Full disclosure, he does spell all of his words wrong because they're in Australia and they're just upside down. It gives him blood rushing to the head. They add U's to everything. I don't know what that's about. It's weird, but Rob's a good guy. So check out his book if you got kids. Mine certainly loved it because I got beta copies from those 2 books. And I forget you can't call them Choose Your Own Adventure anymore because that's trademarked. So whatever they're calling it these days, those books were fun too. So check them out. Links in the show notes.
Wait, hold on. Choose Your Own Adventure is trademark now?
Yes.
When did that happen?
Apparently, it's always been that way, and people have tried it and gotten the cease and desist letters, which is why Pick a Path, Choose a Path, Choose an Adventure, all those came out because they trademarked Choose Your Own Adventure.
Huh.
Oh, that's crazy.
So disappointed.
It is. Although I can't imagine trying to write one of those. I'm picturing that meme where you got the guy with the serial killer face and like string on a board, like connecting up and trying to plot that.
The Pepe Silva from Always Sunny. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, like I'm just picturing that when anyone trying to plot these books. Because that just hurts my head to think about, which is why I don't write them, even though I read them as a kid. Okay, so now that we're back and we're talking about all things Harry Potter. So one of the foundational parts of the story for everyone is obviously when they get there for the first time, they sit in the cafeteria, they do the sorting hat, they get assigned to their club, team, whatever, house. There we go. Is that something you guys did as like super fans when it was coming out? Like, did you take all those tests? What house would you be and all that?
Oh, yeah.
Harry Potter
heck
just
yeah.
sorts people into soccer clubs.
I mean, the hooligan club, the footy club, I don't know. It's British. They do things weird. Send all your hate mail to Stabby, please. My inbox is full. I made the mistake of saying that beer should be drank ice cold and not warm or room temperature. And I got like 150, I counted, emails from the Brits telling me I was drinking my beer wrong. Anyway, all right.
Depends on the type of beer. Some beer is better cold. Some beer is better at room temperature. It just depends.
Mostly I just like, tweaking the nose because my first publisher was British. So I say all things knowing he's listening just to bug him because I can.
Nice.
All right. So
Yeah.
did you guys do the sorting hat in the get assigned to the house when you guys were first discovering it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, that was
Pottermore
it was like the
out.
first. Go ahead, Jesse.
Oh, I was going to say Pottermore was the website you were talking about earlier. It was the full official, like you could go get sorted, you could run tests and everything like that. And the moment it came out, me and every single one of my friends, we were all on that. I have been Gryffindor for every single test I have ever taken. I will ride that red flag till I die.
So this is where I'm going to show a little bit of my age / how much of a nerd I was. Pottermore was the second reincarnation of the Harry Potter, the WB Harry Potter website. I can't remember what the actual original page was, but yeah, they've always had a way to sort houses, and even like every fan page I ever saw, or like long before social media, right? We had the blog boards. Every place had its own way to sort people, and you always took tests to do it. And like a lot of people, you try to cheat to get to Gryffindor. I just accepted my lot in life. I was always going to be a Ravenclaw. It was just not going to change.
Oh, hell,
There's
I tried to
absolutely
cheat to get
nothing
Slytherin.
wrong. I was just say, Shady, there's absolutely nothing wrong with Ravenclaw because that's what
no.
I've been in every one of those tests I ever took. And to show my age, do you guys remember the old AOL chat rooms?
Oh yeah.
I do.
That's how old I am.
we sacrificed robots to get online. And then woe behold, anyone who picked up the phone while you were trying to be on the internet and made a phone call. And I'm like, oh, you jerk. Because we weren't rich enough to afford the second line.
Yeah, I remember when 28.8 baud was fast. That's how old I am. So
so like, because the AOL, you had the AOL chat rooms, and then right after that, Disney had their like original website that you could go on, and that would like, my parents hated when Disney came out with that because they'd go to make a phone call. Who's on the computer right now? It's, me ducking over to those. I'm playing the Disney games. Leave me alone. Or I'm on, the Harry Potter website. Leave me alone. You got to get off so we can make a phone call.
Yeah. Did you do those too? Oh, you said you cheated for Slytherin. Why did you want Slytherin?
Because they just seemed cool sometimes. And if I'm being honest, Tom Felton's hot, and he played Draco Malfoy. I've always been a little bit sympathetic to Malfoy, especially after book 6.
Yes.
Like, he got in way too far over his head and didn't realize until he was stuck. So as much of a jerk as he was in the books, I still felt bad for him.
He had a decent redemption arc, though, I think.
That's true.
See, it's funny. I just saw, I'd seen something on Facebook even recently. They're like, who didn't have a redemption arc that deserved a better one or something like that? And Draco's like right at the top of the list because that kid was a product of nature versus nurture. And like, he is the class case for it. And then you sort of start to see him have that arc, but you never quite get it fully fulfilled. Right.
Yeah.
I think in my case, I was also kind of a bad kid wannabe. Never quite wanted it enough to commit to the bad kid thing, but it was always kind of, they're cool. I want to be cool. Pick me.
So the difference between Ravenclaw and Slytherin is just one step of ambition. That's it.
Or morality. One of the two.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could see that.
I'm just going to smile and nod, and we'll just keep moving. It
would be kind of fun, actually, to do those now as a full adult, not like a young adult or a teen or something, just to see what's changed since then.
So speaking of Pottermore, I rejoined Pottermore about 2 years ago and took the sorting test, and I still got Ravenclaw. Every once in a while, if I try and aim for like one of the houses or something, depending on the day, I can get Slytherin or Gryffindor as like a secondary house. But
how many houses were there?
Four.
So Hufflepuff being the fourth one. And my favorite part about the Hufflepuffs is that everybody who's a Hufflepuff absolutely proud to be one. But nobody else who wants to be one, right? They're like, oh no, I got Hufflepuff, I'm retaking this test.
So true.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was last year, one of my nieces hands me her cell phone. She's like, Auntie, you got to take this test. I was like, what kind of test? I didn't study. She's like, no, it's a Harry Potter test. I'm like, okay, I'm good. Took the test, and it probably been 20 years since I took the other one. Still Ravenclaw. I still got it.
Yeah.
So did the various houses have very like characteristic traits? Like I know Slytherin were the bad guys, at least, if you've seen any of the commercials for the movies.
Oh yeah.
Slytherin is not supposed to be innately evil. It's supposed to be ambition is the driving principle behind Slytherin. And Harry almost gets sorted into Slytherin. The hat itself has a conversation with Harry about that because Harry just doesn't want to be a Slytherin so bad. Ravenclaw was intelligence, Gryffindor was bravery, and Hufflepuff was loyalty. And those are the big so, and it's kind of meant to be the core. Like a Slytherin can be brave, a Hufflepuff can be brave. A Hufflepuff can be brilliant, but it was your kind of your gut instinct or core principle what it was.
Right.
But on
I remember.
What Jesse was, what I was going to say was on what Jesse was saying though. The Sorting Hat made it very clear in book 1 that what you want, what you choose, right? Your choices matter.
Yes.
And so that was very clear from the beginning that no matter what the hat thought you were good for, and it would try and bring out those characteristics. Like, you're already strong here, let's delve into that and make it better. But your choices also mattered. And so that was kind of the big piece of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when Harry's sitting there and he's like, please not Slytherin, please not Slytherin. And the Sorting Hat's like, oh, okay, if you're sure, then I guess it's going to be Gryffindor.
Yeah, if you could be good there, you could be great, you know.
Yep.
You sure? Okay.
So how much of the stuff changed about the various houses and the Sorting Hat ritual from the book to the TV version, to the movie?
Not too much, I don't think.
No,
because
Yeah,
you
the first
still
movie-
had that conversation with the hat, at least for Harry. You don't see anyone else's,
Yep.
but you don't see anyone else's in the book either.
The first movie was pretty much blow for blow.
Mhm.
Anything they pulled was pretty close. There were only a couple things they changed, and they were very like minor. They didn't really start driving changing bigger things until book 4, and that was just because
Yeah.
they had to find ways to make the story work inside of the time limit of a movie.
Even book 3 was starting to or movie 3, I should say, was starting to deviate a bit from that same feel.
See,
At least I
that
thought.
Yeah, see, and for me, and it could be because Prisoner of Azkaban was the movie that I saw right after I read the book, I thought that one followed the book the most closely of all of them. But it could have just been a timing thing,
That's possible.
maybe.
And I agree. A lot of the differences between the books and the movies overall are timing issues. You miss some really wonderful stuff because we'd already addressed like J.K. Rowling's world building. These other places that she fleshes out are so fantastic. But you know, in a novel, you can take 50 pages to run off to Hogsmeade just for just to get some butterbeer and then come back. In the movie, you don't have time for that. So you know, there's stuff like that that's skipped. Some of the things feel a little bit different. You know, everybody sees the book in their mind, so you're always going to have your own image. Myrtle in the movie and Myrtle as I see her in my head are not the same visually at all. That's just one small difference, but the characters' actions, the way they spoke, work at the core, you know, close enough that I don't have a complaint. And I would say overall the movies do a decent job.
Did they ever let Myrtle's spirit go to rest? Or is she going to be a ghost in perpetuity?
Oh no, she's in perpetuity.
Yeah. Yep.
Poor girl.
No, it's poor the rest of us. She needs to move on.
Okay, so that's one of the things that stands out based on what you were just saying, Jesse, about this book from others. A lot of times in fantasy, the trope is the chosen one, and it's predestination, and you're kind of destined to do these things, and you don't have a whole lot of agency. So the idea to take a fantasy novel where the agency goes to the character is, I think, already kind of turning some of those tropes on its head just from the beginning to say, like, what you do and what you think matters. It's the age-old nature versus nurture, right?
Well, and yeah, I mean, there's that, but it also felt like she had been plotting the essentially upending the Chosen One narrative fairly early on. Because then, you know, spoiler alert for those of you who haven't read these 20-year-old books, because then she goes on later and essentially announces that it could have been any one of two people that got the mark that night. And Harry finds that out. And then, you know, like, even then, she still gives the other character, Neville Longbottom, like the heroic act arc. And so, like, you see that he could have just as easily, if he had been marked by the Dark Lord. And what you find out is, right, that the Chosen One is chosen by one of the by the bad guy, by the antagonist of the whole series, right? So it is all about choice and not really about predestination, and then what you choose to do with that.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that Voldemort is the inevitability, and he does all of these things he kind of does to himself. It was a really great villain setup of that. The reason, like the whole reason Harry's the chosen one, the whole reason Harry's stuck with this future is because the bad guy just will not let it go and move on. He just won't. And that's interesting. You know, one of the memes that makes me laugh all the time was you could just keep killing Voldemort over and over and over again. It's like every however many years you've just got to kill him again. Like he keeps showing up on the doorstep. It's,
I thought I got all the
yeah,
Horcruxes. What the heck?
He's Mr. Meesinks.
I will say that one of the things that Harry Potter has going for it is it's become so iconic. Like when people make the jokes about vampires, just they better not sparkle like Twilight. But she sold enough that she became part of the lexicon when people talk about vampires. And you see that with Harry Potter. You can't meet someone without them knowing something about it, if it's the butterbeer or the Quidditch, to the point where they've got whole leagues where people run around with broomsticks between their legs and pretend, like grown adults even. And so like I definitely think she made culture enough that I can't even type in Voldemort into a Word document without it auto-correcting the spelling, because it's become so ubiquitous, which is a testament to her skill as an author.
Yeah.
JR, Nick's not here. Can you do the banner? Do you have the banner, or does Nick have to do the banner?
What banners do you need? I can do them. I just never remember.
You brought up Twilight. You got to do the banner. The vampires don't sparkle.
Oh,
he has a different set of banners than I do.
So here's the thing: you went from Tolkien to Harry Potter to Dresden. I went to Twilight.
I will find it, but yeah, the Vampires Didn't Sparkle, that's on Nick's list, so I have to go back. But yeah, the reason that joke lands is because so many people read the book, right? Like that they know that. Just like everyone jokes about Nickelback if you want to talk music, but enough people listen to their music that people still know who they are. Like, so there's I don't know, skill in that alone.
Well, and despite calling them sellouts, right? People still listen to their music, and you're like, "Oh man, they're so sellouts," and I'm like, "They're not selling out. They're not just selling out. They're selling out large venues for lots of freaking money. They're apparently not doing it wrong."
Yeah.
Yep.
There we go.
There it is.
Don't tell Nick I used his banners.
It's my fault. I asked for it.
Anyway,
way to go, Jesse.
But yeah, so I do think she definitely changed culture. And after this came out, like if you remember at the time, like my sisters were all about the Charmed. And once Harry Potter became big, of course they added in the magical school angle, right? Because Harry Potter was big. I mean, you saw the trends as everyone tried to chase the lightning in a bottle that she managed to capture. And so she was setting trends, which I think takes skill.
I will say there also was a really good one before that. Wizard's Hall by Jane Yolen. That was actually the first Wizard School book I read. I think Rowling actually got into a legal battle with Yolen over that. I think Rowling won, but but Wizard's Hall came first. Highly recommend.
Interesting.
It's really good. It's similar enough that it's understandable how Yolen and Rowling got into it legally over, plagiarism charges from Yolen to Rowling say, hey, you stole my story. But it's also different enough that, at least for me, it's enchanting in its own way. It's different enough.
Well, right. Go ahead.
I was going to say it's only one book, so.
Contemporary to this that came out just before is The Worst Witch, which is also a Witch Academy book by Jill Murphy. There we go. Because I got a Netflix adaptation that my kids loved. But I mean, like, it wasn't that the Magical Academy didn't exist. She just made it cool enough that everyone else tried to jump on that train to ride the waves of to the farm.
Well, and then she also, speaking of other series that predate Harry Potter, Diane Duane had done a young normal people into wizards series starting in the 80s, starting with the book So You Want to Be a Wizard. And now, granted, I didn't start reading that series until after I'd gotten into Harry Potter, so I didn't realize kind of what the parallels were going to be. Her whole thing was not about Wizards Academy. It was more about they had to learn on their own. It was very, very kind of like Wiccan-esque, where these guys are going out into the woods and practicing their witchcraft and wizardry, but they all have different kinds of powers, different different attunements to different elements, that kind of thing. So when you start to actually look at it, she was taking a lot of series that were actually doing well. And she found a way to what I'll say for the Diane Duane series before I kind of finish that thought. It is very much like if I had tried to read it younger, I would not have caught into it near as much. It is very mature, very heavy, but like high school mature. And it's written with middle schoolers starting, right? So she starts in the exact same place. Like they start in the same place. But what, Charlie mentioned earlier that J.K. Rowling did was she captured the kids at the time in that age group with the right kind of writing and then matured the writing as it went. Whereas Diane Duane, it was almost all like mature topics the whole way through.
Do you think that was because J.K. Rowling said, let's start it writing for this age, and as my audience grows, I will change my writing style? Do you think it was more just, the more you write, the more you work? Like I will say, having my own experience, we're all obviously authors. Your first experience with an actual professional editor will change to a degree how you write, because you learn things that you didn't remember if they covered in, high school English, where you basically tried not to drool on yourself because you were sleeping. And so I wonder whether that was intentional by her, whether it was just her writing getting better, or she just aged it up as her characters aged up.
I think it's all three, right?
Yeah.
I think she had a game plan from the beginning that she was going to mature it as she went. It just so happened that to be able to write more mature, you get better. You have to get better as you write. And so I think that helped it a lot. And then on top of that, you got to change the problems that they're dealing with because they are in different age groups, right? Like your problems in middle school were not the same problems you had in high school. So there is a little bit of like, some of it's planned, some of it almost has to be, and some of it is the fact that she was going to get better as she got going.
Okay. Obviously there's like a crap ton of books. There's all the movies, there's follow-on books, there's all the drama with JK herself. There's plenty of room for this episode to go very long. But the first episode is always sort of shotgun scattershot, right? And then we'll dive deeper on follow-up episodes. But was there anything that as a takeaway for listeners who, might not have actually consumed the Potterverse books or shows that you would say to a potential future consumer?
It's worth a try.
Yeah, it's worth going just to understand. I tried to read Twilight. I failed, but I did try. Because there's certain things in the lexicon. It's like reading the Bible, the Quran, and like the Torah and stuff like that. You're going to understand your fellow man better, especially if you're a nerd. If you're already in this space and you haven't consumed this, then you lack understanding in something that fundamentally changed your culture, and that's important.
I'm just going to say Sister Mary Catherine, who taught my catechism class, would have a word with you about comparing anything to the Bible, especially a fiction book.
Ooh, with magic.
I meant more on a cultural basis, but instead of actual comparison. But yeah, that's fair.
Don't make the nuns mad. Don't do that.
She scared me.
I do it all. All I got to do is raise an arm and make the nuns mad.
Yeah, I'd rather get shot a third time than make that lady mad at me. I'm just saying.
Oh, gosh.
Ooh, thanks.
You were scared.
My one takeaway would be that the room of requirement needs to be a thing in real life.
Which is what?
So there's this room in this hallway that if you think that you need something, or that you need something or somewhere really badly, this room will transform itself into whatever you need. I think it's in the first book. It's a bathroom because Harry really has to pee in between classes. And then in another book, I want to say Order of the Phoenix, it becomes a training room where the kids do their extracurricular activities that I won't spoil for people who haven't read the books yet. But I thought that was brilliant.
I think that was fourth book. That was Dumbledore. Dumbledore relayed that story during the Yule Ball, I think.
Okay, I could be wrong. Okay.
I think that's it. Or it could have turned up in book one and I just missed it. That's possible. But yeah, room of requirement.
It turns up in every book.
They
don't always tell you which it is.
So that's sort of like the fantasy version of the holodeck on Star Trek.
Yeah, in a way, yeah.
If the holodeck appeared randomly just when you needed it, because it's not even in one set place. It can be anywhere in the castle and it just pops up.
Okay.
I thought it was in the same place.
I think it might depend.
The room of requirements usually in the same place, but it's not always visible to everybody as you walk by.
Right.
So it's usually just kind of like a wall or whatever.
So
in the first book, I believe I think you're right, Teri. I think the bathroom story is Dumbledore's from either book 3 or 4. If I'm not mistaken, book 1, it's the room where the Mirror of Horizon Desire is.
Oh, Mirror of Erised. Okay.
Ooh.
Yeah. And that's why he finds it, because he's trying to find a place to hide.
Oh, that makes sense. Oh, chills. I have chills. Okay. I didn't catch that my first read through.
I never even thought of that.
Nobody's ever gone back to confirm it, right? It's just one of those, like, the mysteries that even, like, JK is like, well, I'm not going to tell you.
It would make sense, though, to hide it there.
Yeah. That's the one thing, like, kind of going back. So the big takeaway, right, is that for J.K. Rowling, for Harry Potter in general, every detail that goes in, there's usually a purpose, and they always lead to something. And I can think of very few things that she never tied up loose ends for. She always brought characters back that she mentioned previously. She always was really good about, even if it was a throwaway line, and whether or not people responded to it, she always had a plan, or at least it seemed like she always had a plan, right? And that's the brilliance of her writing, was it always seemed like she had a plan for that piece, and it appeared later. And so if you haven't read it, even if you've seen the movies and just haven't read it, I would absolutely go read the series. Like, it captures everybody.
Yeah, she also is kind of famous for historically retconning to the social zeitgeist of now. Like, insert the modern thing. This character totally was. I'm like, why that wasn't a thing back then when you were writing this? Why would that have been in your thought process? And it's always funny to watch the fans go back and forth on Twitter or X, I guess now, where they're like, no, on page so-and-so of book so-and-so, you said this. So she definitely inspired very passionate fans.
And some passionate enemies.
Absolutely. But even the ones that disagreed with her politics, and we won't go there here, they didn't want to cancel her so bad that they wanted to stop reading the books because they were so invested in the world. They were like, okay, I suddenly discovered I can like the art and not the artist.
Yeah.
Which is where you get the meme, read another book. There are more books out there, I promise. So Teri and Shady, did you guys have any closing thoughts?
I think that's pretty much captured it. Give it a try if you haven't. And if you don't like it, that's okay. You don't have to.
That's right.
But they are awesome. They're totally awesome.
All right. Yeah. And if it sounded like I was rambling, dear listener, this is all Stabby's fault for going on a date and not coming to this podcast. And so when we do the follow-up episodes, because I know there's going to want to be, because she's like super hardcore fan, I will make sure she's here so one of us can sound like we know what the hell we're talking about. And with that, so random thought, because one of the things that you see in modern online fandom cultures, which Harry Potter was one of the first I heard about that had that, is everyone shipping everybody. Like, I want this character and this character to get together because reasons. Did you guys participate in any of that when you were reading it the first time?
I wrote a whole fan fiction based on that.
Though
I cheated. I used one of her characters, Severus Snape, but I used one of my own, an original character, to explain why Snape is the way he is. And I'll be damned if I wasn't close. It was the whole theme of love again. I got close because I finished it before book 7 came out.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
So.
Are you going to shave the serial numbers off and publish it on your own?
Probably not. Probably not. It's a little bit too close.
What about the rest of you? Did you guys participate in any of the relationship shipping that the fandoms all did?
I don't think I did. I was happy that things ended up where they did with Harry and Ginny and Ron and Hermione. I think the way that J.K. Rowling wrote it, it made sense why they ended up that way, and I was happy with it.
I'm just saying it was very clear that book was written by a woman, because no man who's ever dated their friend's little sister and knows how badly that always ends would have had that as the ending. I'm just saying, don't do it, people. Pass, find someone else. There's more fish in the sea. Just don't do it. No.
So you're saying there's a reason this is fiction. Got it.
Absolutely. I'm just saying, sorry, but it just didn't work out with Jessica because I'm just saying it just is a thing, right? I get it. I understand. She had big brothers. They were mean, and there were lots of them. Catholic family. I'm just, nope. All right. With that, Jesse, how can listeners and readers and viewers and all the things find you at home, and what are you writing?
So they can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook if you really want to. It's more of a personal page. I do free stories on Reddit as Outlaw Author. You can also find me on Twitter, X, whichever you prefer to call it. I am working on about 1,800 different things. I am working on, the next thing you'll see from me is an urban fantasy. It's going to be in a touch of Aether from Three Ravens Publishing. It's called Dead Wolf. That's going to be a lot of fun. I'm working on my own special universe that you may or may not see some of the people in this podcast in. I got to talk with them about that. And I am working on Cogs and Cutlasses story for the next J.R. Handley Presents as well. So as soon as I can get all this stuff written, you're going to have a lot from me.
Outstanding. What about you, Charlie? Where can they find you, and what are you working on?
So as my name there says, you can find me at charliecox.net. Make sure you don't put an I in there because I don't know where you'll end up. So Charlie, no E, charliecox.net. Sign up for my newsletter. I send it out once a month. I promise I will not spam anybody. As far as current projects, I have a short story that released a couple weeks ago in the Bureau 42 anthology from Chris Kennedy Publishing. It's set in the Four Horsemen universe, and stories are about the Peacemaker, which is a subcategory or sub-genre within the 4HU. It's a lot of fun. And I'm working on 3 different trilogies at the moment. I have a book written in the JTF 13 series from Three Ravens Publishing. I have a book written with Marisa Wolf in the Car Warriors universe, also with Three Ravens Publishing. I don't have a release date on either one of those yet, but hopefully soon. And until then, I'm going to keep writing. So thanks again for having me.
Outstanding. All right, Shady, what are you writing now, and where can they find you?
What am I writing now? What am I not writing? That's the real question. Right now, I am working on an urban fantasy in the Milesian Accords by John R. Osborne. That has several books set to come out, but I'm currently writing the first book of my part of the series. There, I have a short story getting published tomorrow, July 26th. I know this is probably not going to come out that quickly, but so if you're catching this later on, Remnants of Empire and the Ashes of Entesia series over on Amazon. We got a bunch of new space opera stories coming out, space opera sci-fi stories coming out, and that's I've got a couple other short stories right now in the works, but primarily just working on that urban fantasy.
Okay, what about you, Teri?
I am kind of like, where's Waldo? I'm not always easy to spot, but most commonly on Facebook. As for current projects, I just finished up another Nightshade novel by J.F. Posthumous, so that'll be coming out hopefully sometime in the not too distant future, as for the dear listeners. And for writing, I'm working on book 3 of my yet to be released trilogy. I'm hoping to get the 3rd book done so they can all come out at the same time. That's the hope.
Outstanding. So, and this is one of those things where as the closing, because Shady's here, so it's a perfect topic. If you're watching as we record this on July 25th, they just released the drone combat footage from the Ukraine versus Russia war. We won't go into the politics of it because we're apolitical here, but one of the drones from the Ukrainian side literally taped a stick to it, and to try to take out the Russian drones, they were basically jousting in the air. And I want you to know, if we wrote that in any one of our books, they would tell us how unrealistic it was. This is just yet another example of where sometimes reality is stranger than fiction.
Do you know how often I have come across little things that, humans are space orcs, where they have these theories that, okay, the little cleaning robots, the humans would put a butter knife on that and have them joust. This is exactly that, but in real life.
I just remember my
man.
very first edit for that British publisher, Tim Taylor. I had a scene in there, and I don't even remember what it was at this point. And I wrote it, and he goes, "That's not realistic, JR. Nobody will believe it." I'm like, "What are you talking about? That happened to me. I can give you the incident report." I don't care. No one will believe it. So I had to take it out. And it always amuses me when you see things that happen in real life, but if you wrote it in a book, nobody would believe it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and with that, this is the point in the interview, dear listener, where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right book, so do your part. And with that, you can support us and find us on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast, where we link to all the things: the Bit Shoots, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the Twitters, the emails, Blasters and Blades podcast @gmail.com for professional purposes only, people. We also link to the Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. And most importantly, we link to Madam Stabby Stab on the Instagram, Twitter, and email. Send all the hate mail to her. She's here for it. She's got nothing else to do. Inundate her mailbox, people. Leave mine alone, please. All right. And with that, you can also go to the Linktree and find our website over on Spotify, where you can support the show for as little as 99 cents a month. You can help keep the lights on, and every penny does help. Or you can support the show more directly at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment sections for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee till it flows out of their hair. I don't know what that would look like, but out of the eyeballs is overdone by me, so I'm just trying to mix it up, people. And if you use the link in the show notes and the code podcast grunts, you get 10% off. So we get a kickback, you get a discount. It's a win-win, people. And just avoid shopping there if you're on a diet, because their snacks will make you gain weight just looking at the descriptions. I'm just putting that out there. And with that, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. All right, guys, thank you for coming on. We definitely have more room to narrow this down and do some more niche focused episodes. And if we do, you guys all get first crack at coming back. You were great guests. You carried the water because I had no idea what I was talking about, and I appreciate all of you. And with that, we are going to hit the end button. Boom! Wait for it.